What's up, guys? Welcome to the Zapata Brand Podcast, brought to you by Ringside. Go to ringside.com/podcast, and you too could get upwards of 40% off selected brands. Well, it's been a while, and it's been too long until I got my buddy Kevin Iole from keviniole.com on, and I'm going to call him Mr. Controversy right out of the gate today. If you guys saw UFC 303 press conference, you know what I'm talking about. Kevin Iole from keviniole.com. How are you?
I'm doing good, George. How you been?
Life's good. I'm busy, as you could tell. I got a little sun here, putting a deck on for the last couple days, and just trying to figure it out. I'm not a good contractor, but I follow directions well. My wife said to put it up, so I did.
Call Mike Holmes. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, well, I needed a little more help than that. I can tell you that. The roof was a bear. But let's get back to 303 and why I called you Mr. Controversy right out of the gate. You ruffled a little feathers there with Dana White, but I'm going to ask that question a little bit differently because I kind of want to know where you stood on, obviously, Alex Pereira KO's jury pretty quickly. Second round KO, 19 seconds in, kind of cemented himself as one of the best fighters pound for pound, which is where the controversy comes in. Dana White, and I'll tell you real quickly, Dana White has a strong stance on pound for pound. You had brought it up. What happened and how did it get a little out of control?
Well, a lot of people think it got out of control. I didn't think it really got out of control, right? But we were talking about Alex Pereira and his dominant performance over Yuri Prochazka in the main event of UFC 303. And before I got the mic, somebody on the other side of the room had brought up John Jones and the number one pound for pound. And Dana began talking on that. And he said, basically what Alex did doesn't affect it. So when I got the microphone, I mentioned Alex and pound for pound. Now, my take on it is John Jones is the greatest fighter of all time. And I did a video on this on my YouTube channel, Kevin Iole, youtube.com/Kevin Iole. And I did a column on it, and the video is embedded on my website in my column. I did it on Sunday. So Dana and I have had, at press conferences over the years, had these kind of things happen. And I basically said, I agree with you that John Jones is the best fighter of all time. And if he was active, I agree that he would be the best fighter now. And then Dana was like, he was hurt. And then he just kept going. And what you couldn't see was, every time I would try to talk, I would start to say something and he would talk over me. Right. And I think we have a good relationship, and he was laughing, and all the UFC staff that was standing there, Hunter Campbell, Lene Breckenridge, Chris Costello, they were all laughing. Right. Because they know the two of us have had, had that kind of, happen in the past. And I don't think there was anything nasty or mean, either way about it. But I could not get my point in, right? Because every time, I would grab the mic and go, and he would start to, and he would just talk over top of me. So I got home and I said, you know what? On Sunday morning, I'm going to make my own video. So I made a video where I could explain two things. He was not crazy about the idea of Pereira moving up to heavyweight right now to fight John Jones. And then secondly, the whole pound for pound thing. And, not a lot of people seem to know this, and which I was surprised when Dana was talking. He didn't know it. The reason pound for pound came into vogue was in the 1940s, and up until that point, boxing was mostly about heavyweights, right? Obviously there was people in other divisions, but boxing focused on heavyweights, and the heavyweight champion was the man and perceived to be the best fighter in the world. So as the 1940s dawned, Joe Louis was perceived to be the best fighter in the world. And Sugar Ray Robinson comes along, wins the welterweight title, and people are seeing him and they're going, this guy is fantastic. He's unbelievable. And they were looking for a way to describe him and compare him in relation to Joe Louis. But Robinson's 147 and Joe Louis is, 205, 200, in that range. They're 50 pounds apart. It's hard. So pound for pound was born to describe that. And that's really what it is. And my argument to Dana, George, and I guess my argument to anybody would be this. It's different all time than it is active. If you don't fight in 1 year, then you go out of the rankings unless you have a fight scheduled, right? Sometimes somebody might be out 10 months and they sign for a fight that'll be 13 months later, I'll leave him in the rankings at that point because, they have a fight scheduled, even though it's going to be passed. But if they're out more than 12 months, I don't feel it's fair for them to be ranked, right? And you look at John, and John fought in February of 2020 at light heavyweight. Then he didn't fight again until March of 23, and then he hasn't fought since then. So he fought one time in more than 4 years.
Right.
Is that fair to keep him number one pound for pound to other fighters who are active? And that was the point I was trying to make to Dana. I agree. I think John Jones is phenomenal. I think he's a great fighter. I would have him number one if he was active. So I think it was more theater than everything else because Dana had a big smile on his face, and I don't think it was anything terrible.
No, I think Dana has a perception that pound for pound means fighter across the board. If two guys went in a room, one guy comes out, or pound for pound fighter, meaning this guy right now. I think he misunderstood you, I think, because you were just saying, hey, it's that 1 year. He hasn't been active. How can you rank someone who hasn't been active over someone who is active? And I think he just wanted to run with that John Jones narrative. And it kind of, I mean, people were getting crazy, but I said, I think they're just kidding here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we weren't, like I know certainly there was no hard feelings on my part, and I don't think he meant it toward me with hard feelings. As he left, right, the room, I was sitting right there at the end. I was sitting on the end of the first row, and he kind of winked at me as he walked out, right? So I mean, I think there was nothing that was bad, but I'm not going to just sit there and let him say something without challenging it when to me it was so obviously wrong. Right. It's an opinion, but all I was trying to make the point is hey, he hasn't been active, so how can you rank him? It's like, are we going to go back? Are we going to keep Michael Spinks in the rankings?
Well, overall the card, Kevin, I thought it was good. A lot of chaos happening there.
My God.
What was it like there? Because it's got to be so stressful to having these fights fall out. Then you think you got the fight fixed. Then okay, we have him jumping up to 50 now. Then it was, now he has 103 fever. Then there's so much happening in there. What is it like when you're actually there? Can you guys know what's going on? Because I saw you had a short clip with Dana White came over and talked to you. As it was going on. What was that all about?
So basically I want to say this was about 4:30. We got, I shouldn't say we, John Morgan was sitting next to me. Both he and I heard around the same time, hey, there's a chance that Brian Ortega is off this card. So we were both, starting to try to report the story to figure out what was going on. But I don't want to, my thought, especially as a fight is on live, I don't want to say a guy is off the card unless I know 100%, because that could affect sales at that point. There's a lot that it could affect, right? So I wanted to be, it's one thing if the show is in 2 weeks and you're trying to, report it, you always want to have confirmation, but, I wanted to have triple confirmation this time. Mm-hmm. So we're having, we're starting to hear those rumors, 4:30ish that something's going on. Then we see Ali Abdelaziz makes a tweet about, going to be the craziest night in MMA history. So now all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute. And then we see Eric Nixick puts a tweet out that he's at Dan Ige's house. So we're going, what in the heck? So Dan Ige is in. So like I was sitting there and I called Ali, I called Eric Nixick, I called Ige, I called Dana, I called Hunter. I was calling other people, trying to find out what was going on. There was a couple people that were there that were in the know what was going on. And I asked and I got smiles, right? But no confirmation. So it's like, holy shit, there, this. So I want to write a story. So finally I felt like I had enough and I wrote a story saying, Dan Ige is going to come in and fight, blah, 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 blah. At that point, Dana was signing autographs for fans that were next to us. They have a bigger VIP section now at the big pay-per-views. It used to be, where I sit, right? So I'm basically directly opposite Dana. And usually the VIPs, the celebs were always on that side. But now in the Vegas shows, they get so many celebrities that they put some of them on our side, on the media side of the ring. So the media section is cut in half now, and there's less media on the floor and there's more VIPs. And the VIPs, like John Morgan and I, are right at center, and we go right. And the celebrities are now to our left. And so Dana was talking to some of those celebrities over there, and he was taking pictures. So I'm shouting to him, and he sees me, and I just got my phone, and I held up the phone like, I want to do an interview with you. So he nods his head. So he came over, and that was about, let's see, what fight was going in the ring? It would have been the last fight of the
prelims, right?
The prelims, the ESPN card, whatever fight that was. That was going into the cage. And so he was over, and I knew, he can't be standing there when the fight starts. He's going to have to be back on the other side. So we had to get him. And there was a million people. So, he was talking to somebody, and now they all want his autograph, and they're taking pictures. And I'm like, I'm yelling at him to get over. So he finally came over, and I did the video. So I uploaded it both to YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. So I got it up on all those platforms. Right. So people could see it. And then that kind of, filled in a little bit of the details. And then, of course, the main card started. So I was sitting there at ringside working, a lot of that time. That's why I was tweeting scores and everything. And all of a sudden you didn't see me tweeting anything because I was on the phone. I was texting. I was trying to figure out what was up.
Has that ever happened before?
There's always news. There's always stuff going on.
I'm saying a fighter who hadn't been. He was training for a fight two weeks down the road.
July 20th, 3 weeks.
Has there ever been someone who jumped in like that from the couch?
Not that I'm aware that I can never, in my years of covering fighting, I don't remember it. And nobody that I talked to, Mark Ratner, who used to be the executive director of the Nevada Commission, he's in both the UFC Hall of Fame and the Boxing Hall of Fame. I asked him, and he couldn't remember it. So yeah, it was really kind of crazy. So it was something, it was really something to behold. And God bless Dan Ige. And then what ended up happening was they usually will tell us, like, when we come from ringside to get to the press room, there's a tent at T-Mobile outside. So the press conferences are held in a tent outside, T-Mobile Arena, not actually in the building. That's why if you heard the helicopters and everything, and the noise was so loud, because we're in a tent, not and there's a roller coaster from New York right next to us that's really loud when they go by, right? And so usually we have that going. But the helicopters, were crazy. I'm not sure what the heck was going on with that. But in any event, so they said Dan Ige wasn't coming. Usually when the media gets back in, they'll tell you who's going to come to the press conference. And they said Ige won't be there. And I felt like Ige was worth talking to. So I walked outside the press conference and I called him. And I was talking to him outside, and Dana was on. Dana came in, so I missed the first. If you heard me when I asked my first question to Dana, I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I missed what you said about Ige because I was outside." In fact, then when Dan was on the phone, even as much as I needed to interview him, I could have kept going on, but I had to get back in to hear what Dana had to say. So it's kind of a crazy night.
It was a win-win situation for Ige. He comes in, he's going to get paid big money. And I heard he got paid. The one I heard today that he got life-changing money. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what someone considers life-changing, but nowadays, $1 million ain't so life-changing, but it's in a win-win shot. So he's not going to fight in the July show, obviously.
Dana said he would let him fight if he could. Now, Dan told me that his leg was really hurting and that he was having trouble walking. So that would tell me that he probably won't fight. So, he didn't say yes or no either way. He just said his leg was hurting. So I'm guessing that he probably won't fight, given, what's going on. But Dana did say at the press conference, if he wants to still fight on that July 20th card, we will leave him on that card.
Wow. Overall, give me a rundown of the card, what you thought. I thought it was average. I didn't think it was so spectacular. But what was your thoughts on it?
I thought the preliminary card was pretty good. You had a lot of, fun knockouts. I thought Peyton Talbot looked really good. A 19-second knockout's not a fun fight, but I thought that was kind of a star-making performance. You looked at Peyton Talbot and you said, this guy is going to be something, going forward. I mean, it reminded me a little bit of Sean O'Malley, when O'Malley was on his rise when he beat Eddie Wineland. That was kind of a statement win for him, and I thought it was the same thing for Peyton Talbot. Joe Pfeiffer had an unbelievable knockout of Marc-Andre Barrios. That was fun. That was when I was actually on the phone. I didn't see it live. It was right in front of me too, and I heard this noise, like, because we can hear the punches land a lot of times if they're on our side of the cage, and they were right by us, and I heard whap, and I looked up and I saw Marc-Andre Barrios on the ground, and it was like right in front of me, and so I had to get it on the big screen to see the knockout, and I thought the Swanson Andre Feely fight was really good. The Jean Silva performance, after missing weight, I thought, Jean Silva looked really good. So I thought there was some really fun fights on the undercard. I thought the main card fell flat to a large degree. The Anthony Smith, Roman Dolidze fight was terrible.
Smith didn't look like he was in good shape to me.
Yeah, I don't know. He just didn't look like he had energy, right? I mean, that was the thing. But yeah, that was not a good fight. There was, the Macy Chase on Myra Bueno Silva fight. It gets the cut ended. It wasn't anything until the cut. Unfortunately, it wasn't like the greatest. Even the Ige fight was interesting to me with Diego Lopes because of the circumstance, right? Had Dan been the original opponent, that fight I would have been saying, yeah, that wasn't very good either. But Dan worked. I don't know if people realize Dan had a hard workout. I put it in my story. He had a hard workout on Saturday morning, and he had just gotten on the massage table at home to get a massage, and he got the call about fighting.
Holy cow. Yeah, you talk about a guy jumping in on opportunity. He definitely, he'll be rewarded nicely if he hasn't been already. But let's turn a little bit to the boxing this past weekend. Man, I was on the Teofimo Lopez bandwagon for a long time. I thought he's an up and coming. I thought this guy had the potential to be. I mean, the skill wise, he had the heart, he had everything there. Boy, has he fallen off the wagon here. You have to knock out Steve Claggett. You have got to knock him out. Honestly, I think they put him in this fight against him, Claggett, to showcase him. And they did him no favors with that guy being as tough as he was. A tough guy. I think he was tough. A bunch of losses, but still a tough guy. But you have to showcase yourself in a fight like this. I thought he looked terrible because you have to beat a guy like this.
Yeah, coming off the fight with Jermaine Ortiz is really where I have a problem with it, right? If you look at the fight in a vacuum, it's not like, you're not going to call him Sugar Ray Robinson, but you're not going to be, it's just a win. It's one of the wins in your career, and, it's not a highlight, it's not a low light. But now you say he looked terrible against Jermaine Ortiz, and then you come back with this. And now all of a sandden you start looking and you go, you got the Kambosos fight. He struggled a little bit against Pedro Campa. Didn't look so great against, Sandor Martin. Now, I guess Sandor Martin, it was considered a journeyman at the time. He's a little more than that now, right? I mean, I think Sandor Martin proved he's probably better than people thought he was. Right. But yeah, look, I think Teofimo, could have fought better, and I'm not sure what it is. I thought, like I talked to him, I don't know if you saw my interview with him. I thought he was really in a good frame of mind. Sometimes with he and his dad, his trainer, go back and forth and they battle a lot. And we don't know what was going on in private. And his mom is pretty rough too, right? And so, sometimes he's dragged down by battling with his mom and dad and stuff in his family. But he seemed to me, when I talked to him, like in really good spirits and in really good position. So I thought he was going to perform well. Now, I did ask him in the interview, you haven't had a knockout in a while. What's going on? And, I would have been happy had he had a win where he was landing big punches and was crisp and clean, and you felt like he was dominating a guy, even if he didn't stop him. But I kind of felt like, it was just, Teofimo won, and, but there was nothing like, do I really want to see him again? And, I know his personality and I know what he's capable of, so I want to see him again. But if you were a person that just viewed him for the first time, I don't think you said, hey, I want to watch this guy anymore.
Does that lend credence to having family, father particularly, as a trainer for this length of time? Like, because most of them end bad. I've only seen a couple that have been good. This is not the same guy we saw 2-3 years ago. It's because of all the other outside stuff going on between the wife, the mom, the dad. Something's going on with the dad. I don't know what his issues are outside the ring, and the wife. And even so, people were writing stories about that prior to this. So, prior to people finding out. We're talking when he was really, really, really on the rise. They were saying you got to watch this outside stuff with him.
Yeah,
talented as he may be, there's outside stuff. Does this give any credence to that? Saying, hey, your father can take you so far, and then move on.
Well, I mean, he took him the undisputed champion, right? So you got to give credit for that. But here's what I would say in answer to that question, because that's a very common question when you talk about Teofimo Lopez. I would equate it to a team sport, right? Sometimes the message from the coach gets lost right after a while, and you got to fire the coach to get the rest of the team going. The coach is sacrificed. And I think in Teofimo's case, that's probably where it is right now. He and his father have butted heads for a long time, and they probably each come to an accommodation, right? Teo, the fighter, is probably, like just only half listening to what his dad says, and Teo, the trainer, is probably, backed off on some things he used to be a stickler for. And so I think it's time where, like, if this were the Philadelphia Phillies, they would fire the manager, right? They would say, okay, it's time to, get a new manager in there. And so I think it would help Teofimo to, put him in with somebody that, would look at him differently, would say things differently, even if they're the same things, to motivate him. And I think that would be a good thing for him. And I'll tell you, Freddie Roach would be great for him, because who is Freddie Roach best with? Freddie is best with guys who were veterans who have kind of fallen off the wagon and rehabilitate them. And he can find what their best was. And I think he would do great with Freddie Roach. And I think he would love Freddie, and working with Freddie and Marvin Somodio would do a lot for him if he chose to go down that route.
So it leads me to two things. One, where does he go from here? And two, does he get at least one more shot to, to prove that before people start saying, we're not going to buy this crap?
Well, the one thing we forget is 2 fights ago, he looked really good against Josh Taylor, right? So, he had the win over Josh Taylor where, there was a lot of chaos in his camp. That was probably the most crazy one, and he looked great against Josh Taylor in that fight. So, I think he's going to get another big fight. No doubt about it. And he's a world champion. He's, a big name. He's fought on ESPN. He's one of the better known fighters out there. So I do think Teofimo is going to get another big fight. Who that is going to be against will be interesting to see, but I think that there's going to be a big fight, for him out there.
Well, I hope so. I think a Haney fight would be better for him rather than a Garcia. Garcia, I really think, is a guy right now who is, I don't know if I really am much interested in Garcia anymore. Some of the nonsense that's going on, having these Twitter wars or X wars with people, Zab Judah, and then Ishe Smith.
Claressa Shields.
What's that?
Claressa Shields. He was with her.
Claressa Shields. I mean, there's just he's becoming unlikable. So that's going to hurt his star power in the long run. He's got to straighten his act out. He has to. So
these people he's with that are fans of his, it's like, what, number one, how do they think he knows all this information he's exposing? How gullible can you be? But then, people say he's a man of God, and look at what Claressa Shields posted, what he was saying to her, right? I mean, just, and his whole thing, like he's 12 years old, he brings up sex as an insult. Like, I had sex with your mom. Oh boy, that really is something, Ryan. I mean, he's disgusting. I mean, I think flat out disgusting. And I think it comes from mental health issues. And that's a really sad thing, right? That's nothing to rip somebody for, but I mean, he has to be controlled. Somebody in his family, somebody somewhere has to grab him and get his account away from him and get him help, because he needs help bad. And what he's doing is making a fool of himself.
Okay, so we said that prior to the fight with Haney. Remember, we both sat there and said, "Hey, there's a mental." Then he pulls off this thing that he's a troll and everybody. You can't keep going. You can't cry.
What did I say? What did I say?
No, you did. You said there's something wrong here. From the thing, but you can't keep crying wolf, because then they're not going to believe you. It's like the woman who keeps saying I was raped, and you find out, hey, you weren't. Well, you kept saying this. You know what I'm saying? There's so many people in it, but the people in this camp too are really. You talk about him being disgusting. There's people in this camp not stepping in. His parents are involved. You step in and say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?"
I 100% agree, right? And the thing is, you don't know what's the true and what's not true. Like you said, his mother had cancer.
Which is horrible to
right. But what we don't know, George, is it true or not? And if it is true, it is really sad, and it might explain some of his crazy behavior. But if it's not true, how do you say that about your mother? And I mean, that is just like, and what he's saying, the things that he says and the way he acts and all that. I mean, it's really nasty. And and hey, look, what we didn't know when we talked both immediately before and after the Devin Haney fight, we didn't know about the drugs right away. The intentional missed weight, right? I mean, that's a big thing, right? These guys. These guys that are cutting down to the weight, the last pound or two is really, really hard. They always tell you that is really difficult. Haney made it. Haney suffered. Haney went through. Yep. And you deplete your body when you do that, and you don't recover right away, right? It takes a while. And Ryan didn't do that. And Ryan, laughed about it. He thought it was funny. He thought he was smart. So yeah, I mean, and people are talking about Haney broke the rules. No, there's no rule. California has a recommendation of how much you should be able to rehydrate, right? Haney rehydrates more normally than they recommend, but there is no rule. You can, if you're 140 and you come in at 190, that's the only rule is what do you weigh on weigh-in day at the contract, right? Now, obviously, nobody rehydrates 50 pounds, but some guys rehydrate more than others. And that's one of the reasons, Canelo is saying, I didn't want to fight David Benavidez because he's going to rehydrate so much and be significantly heavier on fight night. But, Devin Haney is breaking no rules. He is suffering. He's putting his body through that to make 140. And then, and Ryan did not. So I just, keep Ryan away from well, first of all, he's out until next April anyways.
Yeah.
But let's keep him away from any of these big fights until we know, like, I don't think he should get a life sentence, right? I mean, but what he did was pretty bad. And what he is doing now is pretty bad. And most state commissions have a rule that says if you bring disrepute to boxing, which I know is hard to say, but I mean, boxing is disreputable by itself, but if you bring disrepute to boxing, you can further get penalized. Well, look at this crap he's doing. I mean, if that's not bringing disrepute on boxing, I don't know what is. So I think Ryan needs to see a professional and get help. And if he does and gets cleared, then I think he should be allowed to resume his career once his suspension is up.
And two last notes though. Bam Rodriguez fights over the weekend too. Does he solidify himself as one of the top fighters out there? And could he possibly be one to challenge the Monster Inoue? It's a stretch.
I have him in my top 10 now. I think he's a phenomenal fighter. I've had him, close to the top 10 for a while. And at one point, I think last summer I had him in, then I dropped him out when other guys moved up. So, he's been like in that, 10 to 15 range for me for quite a while. I think he's a huge talent, a really really good fighter. Even though Estrada was a little bit on the backside of it, I mean, I think that he was still a formidable opponent, and that was a really big win for him. And I forgot, what was the second part of your question?
Does he put himself in a position where he could possibly challenge Inoue? It's a stretch because I think Inoue will move up a little bit. I think the gap is a little bit too big because
Inoue's at 122 now, and he's at 115. So they're two weight classes apart. And I think there's some fights out there for Inoue that are going to be big fights, including Nakatani, right? And Junto Nakatani, I think
that would be a big one. That would be a really big fight.
And there was somebody that mentioned to me Saturday at the UFC, don't be surprised if Inoue and Nakatani fight sooner rather than later. So that, if that happens, So I think that, given the circumstances, Bam and Noya are too far apart, and it's unlikely that they fight. But you know what? I mean, anything is possible. And I love the idea of the fact that we're talking about this, and we're not just arbitrarily saying, well, he's with the Zone and Eddie Hearn, and he's with Top Rank and Bob Arum, so it'll never happen. Hey, at least there's a possibility of it happening, and so we can look forward to that.
Yeah, that was it. And the last point today I want to make is slap fighting. I saw over the weekend there. And here's why. Paige Van Sant making her debut there. Why anybody... Okay, let me take this back a little. Why any woman would want to do slap fighting is beyond me. I still can't get into slap fighting. I know it is a sport that is evidently growing in popularity and financially doing very well. Okay. Yeah. I don't understand it yet. And I didn't understand UFC when it first started. I didn't get it.
Right.
But the women slapping bothers me a little bit. The men slapping bothers me a little bit just because that impact. Now, what I saw with Paige Van Sant, I looked at it a little weird. It didn't look like the slap was incredibly hard, and the girl kind of took back and then took a knee. I'm not saying she took a knee on purpose, and but she survived the slap. It didn't seem like it was that hard of a slap.
Well, she was hurt. Yeah, no, she was hurt.
Was she hurt?
Yeah, she was definitely hurt. So, but here I'll say this: that girl, Christine Woolamorans, fought Sheena Bathory in her previous fight. And Sheena Bathory is, I don't know what she was. She was a judoka for years. And then she's been training for MMA, but she hasn't fought in MMA yet. And she was a bodybuilder for a little bit. And Sheena was really big. And I think was like 175, maybe even 180. And she had to cut down to 145 to fight Christine Woolamorans, right?
Oh, jeez.
And so Woolamorans fought her at 145. Now Paige is a featherweight, 126, right, in boxing. And so Paige moved up to 135 for the slap fight, and they moved Woolamorans down a weight class. So, I think the reason why you didn't see Woolamorans go flying off the stage the way she might have had she fought somebody else was Paige is smaller, right? And when you saw them together, Woolamorans was a much bigger athlete, right? But Paige is a good athlete, and I think that was one of the things there. A very good athlete. She fought at a high level. She knew how to deliver a strike, and she knew how to take a strike.
Yeah, when I saw it, I thought. Now I could be wrong. I'm not as versed with it. I thought Paige moved a little bit.
Yes,
just a little bit. Okay. And
she got a foul called on her for it once, so basically she took 4 slaps because one of the rules, and they changed this. So now if you flinch, there can be one or two things. They ask the person who threw the slap. They'll say, okay, we can take a point off of her, or you can get to strike again. And so that makes them take an extra strike. So always they want to get that extra strike, right? So they say, I'll slap her again. And so that, that's what they do. So Van Zandt in that 3-round fight, she took 4 slaps. And I thought she flinched on at least 3 of them, if not all 4 of them. Only one of them was called. But yeah, it's a subtle thing. And even when you watch it in slow motion, the strike is coming and then she's doing that, right?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of one of those things that even as you see it in slow motion, it's close. But to the naked eye, I thought she fouled every time.
Yeah, I didn't. I said, "Ooh, I think she moved a little bit," but I'm not the. I wasn't there, so I'm as versed as you
And
are.
they do
No.
what they do have replay there, and they watch the replay. So the
Oh, no
commission does
shit.
do the replay, yeah. So they do watch it.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Well, you know,
I forget there's a hand sign that the referee makes, and I can't remember what the hand sign is, but he makes that hand sign, and then he walks away from the center, and that's when you know they're going to the replay.
oh, no kidding. Yeah. Paige Van Sant is one of these fighters that I'm a little concerned about because I've seen her take bare knuckle, UFC, boxing. I believe she was in boxing, and now slap fighting. Boy, I don't know how much more someone could take. And when she fights, she gets busted up. I
Yeah.
mean, just look at that bare knuckle last fight, unrecognizable.
Well, yeah, she fought twice in bare knuckle. Then she fought in the misfit boxing. And she said, in fact, on that, I asked her about the weight and getting dropped by Elle Brook in that. And she said she lost like 30 pounds over 2 weeks. And so she, wasn't, and she talked about hydration and having, fluid on the brain and making sure you're hydrated when you do that. And so she didn't cut weight for that fight. She was on weight. So fight week, she was around 135. She didn't dry herself out. And so she felt like, she was able to take the slaps because, she had had a lot of fluid on the brain. But she dried herself out against Elle Brook, and she got that draw in the fight. But, when you look at her in the UFC, I mean, she wasn't a great fighter. She was always an attractive young lady, and that was part of her charm. And then, right at the end of her UFC run, she got the boob job, right? And that, and she started the OnlyFans, and that's when she became really big that way. The Dancing with the Stars helped her, got her fame. And so she made a lot of her money away from fighting. And she's making a ton, doing the OnlyFans and the adult stuff that she does. And then she's found, she did pro wrestling. She did the Dancing with the Stars. And so she made some bucks, she said, for the slap fighting. And so I think she's going to help bring other women into it too.
Oh man, but still, she takes a beat, and I'd be worried about her the long term effects. Not a bright future there. I think should stay with what she's doing. She's a beautiful girl. Do that stuff. She'd make a fortune there, and then do that. But Kevin Iolе from KevinIOLE.com. What do you got coming up on the site?
Well, I talked to Shakur Stevenson the other day, and I posted that on my site, on my YouTube channel, and he called Tank Davis a casual. And so you want to go look at that and see what, because I said Tank Davis was ripping you, and Tank Davis basically said you would run if you fought him. And he says, Tank don't know boxing. He's a casual. And then, because when Shakur was saying casual, I thought he was referring to fans. And I said, whoa. This is Tank Davis that said this about you. And he goes, I know, and he's a casual. And so,
oh Jesus.
So he said that. So you can watch that interview now. I'll have a column on that. And then I had two other things. I talked to Gennady Golovkin. So it turns out I didn't even know this. I was the first person to interview Gennady since he lost to Canelo. He hadn't done any interviews, so I interviewed him the other day. He is now the president of the Olympic Committee in Kazakhstan. And one of his goals is to save Olympic boxing. Because of the corruption, there's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of the Olympic federations don't want to have boxing in the Olympics anymore after this year, and they're looking to pull it for 2028 in Paris. So Gennady is trying to keep boxing in the Olympics, and I discussed that with him. I also talked to Heather the Heat Hardy.
I like her. Heather.
Yeah, and I talked to her. She, you talk about getting injured. She's got some brain damage now.
Yep.
She announced her retirement, and she shared her story. So I have that video up on my YouTube channel as well, and I'm going to be writing a story about her this week. You'll see that this week. Thomas Trabassi did a really good story on her last week. I don't believe he had video with her, but I have video with her, and I'm going to write about it for this week. So that's what my week looks like this week.
Well, you've been pretty busy getting a lot of big guests coming on the show. Kevin Iole on YouTube, keviniole.com, Twitter, yeah, well, X, Twitter, whatever it is, Instagram.
Always Twitter to me, dude.
I know, I don't get it. It's just hard to say X, but he wants to push that and brand that. Go ahead, have at it. He can do whatever. But either way, Kevin Iole from keviniole.com. Again, always good to see you, man. Always good to see you.
Brother. Good to see you as well. How's Dennis doing? Dennis
is doing good. He is getting ready to go on vacation the same week I'm going, so it's going to be rough here. Going to be rough.
Is Dennis going anywhere fun?
Nah, he I think Niagara Falls, if I'm not mistaken. Niagara Falls somewhere. Yeah. Dennis is Dennis is a big boat guy. One time he went whitewater rafting, didn't go so well. Yeah, he was missing for a little bit.
I think Dennis might be the next Hall of Famer.
We're pushing that. We're going to push him on as a write-in ballot. You and Dennis together. Hopefully someday I could join you guys in that prestige.
Well, I don't want to bring Dennis's chances down, so let's just go Dennis first.
Well, we have to get him on the show with you guys. We're trying to get all three together. He just has been very busy with his stuff. He's got a lot going on, and my schedule.
Can we get Joe? Can we get Joe? So we have all of us.
He just had referee Mike Chioda on his show from the WWE. He just had him on the other day, so he's busy with his WWE guys. He's his internet's terrible too, so it would jack this whole thing up. I want to keep it straight like this. You got the good Vegas connection. I got the good Berwick connection. Solid, good lighting, nice hair. It's we keep it this way. We're good.
You got way more than I do. That's what I said to Peyton Talbot last week. When he sat down, I interviewed him the week of the fight. I think it was Tuesday of fight week, and he sat across from me, and I said, "Man, I'm jealous of that hair because I
he's got a whole lot of it. You got to work on your tan though, buddy. Let's work on the tan. You're in Vegas. Work on the tan. The sun every day.
We got to get our ass out on the golf course.
All right, when I get out there, we'll be out there. I'll be out there in a couple weeks.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right, my man. Good seeing you.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.